Two waiters whisper about their clueless CEO, mocking his absence and indifference, unaware the new dishwasher standing right next to them is the man they're talking about. What happens when he reveals the truth? And why is no one prepared for what he does next? You won't believe how this unfolds. Tell us where you're watching from. We love hearing from you, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that will leave you speechless. Nathan Pierce wiped his hands on his apron, the faint scent of soap mingling with the greasy aroma of the kitchen. The hum of activity around him was constant, servers rushing to the pass, chefs barking orders, the rhythmic clatter of pots and pans echoing off the walls. No one gave him a second glance as he maneuvered around the cramped space. To them, he was just another dishwasher, the lowest rung on the restaurant hierarchy. He had chosen this role deliberately, eager to see his empire from the ground level. The plan had been simple: spend 2 weeks undercover, understand the daily struggles of his employees, and use those insights to make improvements. But tonight, just 4 days into his experiment, everything changed. It started with the crash. A heavy tray of dirty dishes slipped from his hands, shattering into a cascade of broken porcelain. The sound silenced the room for a moment, heads turning toward the source of the commotion. Nathan froze, crouching to pick up the shards, his face flushing with embarrassment. He was still learning the rhythm of the job, and moments like this reminded him how out of place he really was. Before he could recover, Elena appeared. She was the floor manager, a petite woman with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. Her heels clicked against the tiles as she approached, her expression already twisted in irritation. "What the hell is this?" she snapped, gesturing toward the mess. "Do you even know how to hold a tray, or is that too much for you?" Nathan kept his head down, his heart pounding. He could feel the weight of her glare and the staff's eyes on him. This wasn't the first time Elena had spoken to him like this. He'd seen her berate others in a similar manner, her authority wielded like a weapon. But experiencing it firsthand was different, humbling, infuriating. "I'm sorry," he muttered, gathering the broken pieces as quickly as he could. "Sorry doesn't clean this up faster, does it?" Elena shot back, folding her arms. "Move faster or get out of the way. We don't have time for screw-ups." The sting of her words lingered as Nathan worked. The staff around him had already resumed their tasks, their focus redirected to the next rush of customers. As he stood, carefully carrying the broken dishes to the trash, he overheard 2 servers whispering near the staff lockers. Their voices were low but clear enough to catch. "I swear this place gets worse every day," one of them said, his voice tinged with frustration. Nathan recognized him as Sam, a tall, wiry man who often worked the evening shift. "You're telling me," replied Claire, a younger woman with tired eyes and a no-nonsense tone. "And you know what's crazy? The guy at the top has no clue. What's his name again? Nathan something?" Nathan paused, his back still turned to them. His fingers tightened around the edge of the sink as he listened. "Pierce," Sam said. "Nathan Pierce, the big boss who's probably lounging in some office while we break our backs for peanuts." Claire scoffed. "Yeah, like he even knows who we are. Bet he wouldn't last a day in our shoes." Their laughter was light, almost casual, but to Nathan, it felt like a punch to the gut. He stared at the sink, his reflection distorted in the soapy water. These weren't just complaints, they were truths he hadn't wanted to face. The system he had built, the empire he had nurtured, was failing the people who kept it alive. For a moment, he considered revealing himself, telling them who he was and defending his intentions. But something stopped him. If this was how his employees really felt, then he needed to understand why. He needed to see the cracks for himself, no matter how much it hurt. Elena's voice rang out again, snapping him from his thoughts. "Dishwasher, you're on trash duty tonight. Hurry up, I don't have all day." Nathan took a deep breath, forcing himself to nod. As he carried the trash bags out the back door, the cold night air hit his face, a welcome contrast to the stifling heat of the kitchen. He looked up at the stars, their light distant and indifferent, and made a silent promise to himself. If they thought he didn't care, he would prove them wrong. But first, he needed to learn just how broken his restaurant had become. Nathan returned to the kitchen, his mind a whirlwind of questions. As he slipped back into the rhythm of scrubbing pots and pans, he couldn't shake the voices of Sam and Claire from his mind. Their words lingered like a thorn, digging deeper with every passing moment. How long had his staff felt this way? Had they always been this disillusioned, or was it something that had festered over time? He needed answers, and he needed them soon. The opportunity came faster than expected. During a brief lull in the dinner rush, Nathan found himself alone near the sinks as Sam and Claire stood by the coffee machine. Their voices were low, but the tension in their conversation was palpable. "I'm telling you, Claire," Sam said, running a hand through his hair. "If they don't fix the schedule soon, I'm out. I can't keep missing time with Lily." Claire sighed, her expression softening. "She's still not talking to you?" Sam shook his head. "Barely. I missed her recital last month because Elena pulled me in on my day off. She said it was mandatory." He practically spat the word. "It's like they think we don't have lives outside this place." Nathan's chest tightened. He hadn't realized the extent of Elena's control over the staff. Mandatory shifts on days off, no wonder morale was so low. He kept scrubbing, his ears tuned to every word. "Tell me about it," Claire said, leaning against the counter. "My rent's late again. And if I don't pick up extra shifts, I'm screwed. But every time I ask for more hours, Elena gives them to her favorites instead. I'm barely scraping by." Sam frowned. "It's like she's running her own little kingdom in here. And what about Pierce? Where's the visionary CEO when we need him?" Claire snorted. "Probably on a yacht somewhere, sipping champagne. He doesn't care about us." Nathan's grip on the sponge tightened, the soapy water dripping through his fingers. It wasn't just Elena's toxic leadership, it was his own absence that had allowed it to flourish. He had trusted her to manage this restaurant, but that trust had been misplaced. And now, the people who relied on him were suffering because of it. He needed to act, but he couldn't do it impulsively. Bursting in as the CEO would only create resentment and fear, and it wouldn't fix the underlying issues. If he wanted to make real changes, he had to start from the ground up. That meant staying undercover and digging deeper into the problems. As the night wore on, Nathan began to notice things he had overlooked before. The frayed uniforms some of the staff wore, the chipped tiles near the dishwashing station, the outdated equipment that made even simple tasks more difficult. These weren't just inconveniences, they were signs of a workplace that had been neglected for far too long. During his next break, Nathan sat in the corner of the break room, jotting down notes on a small pad he'd hidden in his apron. He listed everything he had observed: unfair scheduling practices, favoritism, insufficient pay, and Elena's harsh management style. Each point felt like a weight pressing down on him, but it also fueled his determination. The door swung open, and Claire walked in, her shoulders slumped with exhaustion. She grabbed a chair and collapsed into it, rubbing her temples. Nathan hesitated, then decided to take a risk. "Tough night?" he asked, keeping his tone casual. Claire looked up, her brow furrowing slightly. "You could say that. Why?" He shrugged, rinsing out his rag. "Just noticed you've been running around nonstop. Seems like you're carrying a lot." Her eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering in her gaze. "What are you, the new therapist?" Nathan chuckled softly. "No, just someone who's been there. It doesn't look easy what you do." Claire studied him for a moment, then sighed, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. "It's not. But it's a job, right? At least it pays, well, sort of." "Sort of?" Nathan prompted, genuinely curious. She shook her head. "Never mind. You're new. You'll figure it out soon enough." Nathan didn't press further, but the exchange confirmed what he already suspected. Trust wouldn't come easily. If he wanted the staff to open up, he had to earn their confidence. And to do that, he needed to show them he was one of them, not the boss in disguise, but someone who truly understood their struggles. As the shift ended and the staff began to trickle out, Nathan lingered in the back, cleaning up the last of the dishes. He watched as Sam grabbed his coat, his expression weary but determined. "See you tomorrow, Claire," Sam called, heading for the door. "Yeah, see you," Claire replied, her voice flat. She glanced at Nathan before following, her gaze lingering for a moment, before she disappeared into the night. Nathan stood alone in the quiet kitchen, the hum of the refrigerators the only sound. He looked down at the notes he'd scribbled, his jaw tightening. This was just the beginning. If he wanted to fix the cracks in his restaurant, he needed to dig deeper, and he needed to do it quickly. Nathan arrived early the next day, slipping into his apron and blending into the quiet hum of the restaurant before the lunch rush began. The kitchen was a different place in the morning, calmer, almost serene, though there was a tension that lingered like a fog. Staff shuffled in one by one, their faces showing the familiar wear of long hours and low morale. He stationed himself by the sink, scrubbing away at pots and pans as the first orders of the day trickled in. He wasn't just working, he was watching, listening, piecing together the dynamics of the staff. The way Elena barked orders without a hint of gratitude, the way the servers tiptoed around her, avoiding her sharp gaze. It was all part of a culture that had taken root under his nose, a culture he couldn't ignore any longer. As the morning wore on, Nathan noticed Claire rushing between tables, her usual sharpness replaced by a strained, almost frantic energy. She bumped into a chair, nearly spilling a tray of drinks, and quickly apologized to the customer before darting back toward the kitchen. Nathan could see the frustration etched on her face, the weight of something unspoken pulling her down. During a brief lull, Claire stepped into the break room, muttering under her breath. Nathan saw his chance. He rinsed his hands, grabbed a towel, and followed her inside. She was leaning against the counter, her eyes closed, her hand pressed to her forehead. "You all right?" he asked, keeping his voice casual. Claire opened her eyes and gave him a tired look. "Peachy, why do you ask?" He shrugged, leaning against the opposite counter. "You just look like you've got a lot on your mind." Claire let out a bitter laugh. "Don't we all? Welcome to the glamorous life of restaurant work." Nathan smiled faintly. "I'm starting to see that. Still, you seem like you're carrying more than most." She hesitated, her gaze flicking toward the door as if checking for anyone who might overhear. Finally she sighed and said, "It's just, I can't keep up, you know? Between this place, school, and everything else, it feels like I'm drowning. And Elena sure isn't making it easier." "What's going on with her?" Nathan asked, feigning ignorance. Claire rolled her eyes. "Where do I start? She's always breathing down my neck, giving the best shifts to her little favorites, and piling everything else on me. It's like she's trying to see how far she can push before I snap." Nathan nodded, his mind racing. Claire's story wasn't surprising. It fit the pattern he'd been piecing together, but hearing it directly added a new layer of urgency. He leaned in slightly, his voice lowering. "And what about the CEO? Do you think he knows what's going on?" Claire snorted. "Pierce? Please. That guy's probably too busy buying his next yacht to care about what happens here. If he even knows this place exists, I'd be shocked." Nathan forced himself to stay calm, even as her words stung. He couldn't blame her for thinking that way. From her perspective, he had been absent, detached, more interested in profits than people. But that perception wasn't the truth, or at least, it wasn't the truth he wanted to define him. Before he could respond, the door swung open and Elena stepped in. Her eyes immediately landed on Claire, narrowing with suspicion. "Claire, your tables are waiting," Elena said sharply. "Break time's over." Claire stiffened, shooting Nathan an apologetic glance before brushing past Elena and heading back to the floor. Elena's gaze lingered on Nathan, her lips curling into a sneer. "And you," she said, her voice dripping with disdain, "if you've got time to chat, you've got time to work. Get back to the sink." Nathan nodded, biting back the urge to respond. He wasn't ready to confront her, not yet. He needed more time, more information, and a plan that would leave no room for doubt. As the day wore on, he focused on gathering every detail he could. He noticed how Elena's demeanor shifted when she spoke to customers, charming and polished, a perfect facade. He saw how she delegated the most grueling tasks to the staff she disliked, while lavishing praise on her favorites. And he overheard snippets of conversations that hinted at something even darker, money missing from the staff bonus pool, unexplained cuts to payroll hours, perks that never seemed to reach the employees. By the end of the shift, Nathan's notes had grown into a long list of grievances, each one more damning than the last, but it wasn't enough. He needed proof, solid, undeniable evidence that would expose Elena for what she was. And he needed to find a way to win the staff's trust, to show them that they weren't alone. As he walked home that night, his mind churned with ideas. He thought about Claire, drowning under the weight of her responsibilities, about Sam, sacrificing time with his daughter because of unfair schedules, about all the others who had likely left this place, worn down by the same toxic environment. He had built this empire to create something exceptional, something people could be proud of. But somewhere along the way, he had lost sight of that vision. Now he had a chance to fix it, but only if he was willing to face the truth and take the risks necessary to make things right. Nathan clenched his jaw, his determination hardening. Tomorrow, he would start putting his plan into motion. He wouldn't just expose Elena, he would rebuild the trust he had lost, one step at a time. Nathan arrived even earlier the next morning, determined to put his plan into action. The restaurant was quiet, the hum of refrigeration units the only sound as he slipped into the kitchen. He wanted to investigate before the chaos of the day began, to confirm his growing suspicions about Elena and uncover the evidence he needed. He started by checking the employee schedules pinned to the corkboard in the staff area. The pattern was obvious. Certain names, likely Elena's favorites, consistently had prime shifts and lighter workloads. Others, like Claire and Sam, were left with the most grueling hours. He scribbled notes in his small pad, taking care not to draw attention when the first few employees began to trickle in. As the morning wore on, Nathan's focus shifted to the financial discrepancies he had overheard. While cleaning a stack of trays near Elena's office, he noticed the door ajar and her voice filtering out into the hallway. She was on the phone, her tone sharp and confident. "No, they won't notice," she was saying. "I've been running things here for years. Trust me, the numbers are covered. Just make sure the transfer goes through before the next payroll. They'll never figure it out." Nathan's heart raced as he leaned against the wall, careful to stay out of sight. The words confirmed what he had feared. Elena wasn't just toxic. She was stealing from the restaurant. The bonuses meant for the staff, the unexplained cuts to payroll hours. It all pointed back to her. He stepped away as quietly as he could, heading back to the kitchen to process what he had just heard. He needed concrete evidence of her theft, something undeniable that would force her hand. But how? The opportunity presented itself later that day during the lunch rush. Elena had left her office door unlocked, her laptop glowing faintly on the desk. Nathan's pulse quickened as he realized his chance. As soon as she stepped out to berate a line cook, he slipped into the room and quickly scanned the files on the screen. Her email inbox was open, and a thread titled, "Payroll Adjustments, Urgent," caught his eye. He skimmed through it, his suspicions confirmed. The emails detailed her instructions to funnel money from the staff bonus pool into a separate account under her name. There were spreadsheets, emails, and even a PDF copy of the transfer receipt. The arrogance of her carelessness made his stomach churn. He snapped a few quick photos with his phone and slipped out just as Elena's heels clicked back toward the office. As Nathan returned to his station, his mind raced with how to proceed. He couldn't confront Elena yet. He needed to time it right, to ensure the staff was on his side when the truth came out. And for that, he needed their trust. During the next break, Nathan saw Sam sitting alone in the break room, scrolling through his phone with a faraway look. Nathan approached, pulling up a chair and setting down 2 cups of coffee he had snagged from the kitchen. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. Sam glanced up, surprised, but gestured to the seat across from him. "Sure, what's up?" Nathan slid one of the cups toward him. "Figured you could use this. You've been running non-stop." Sam chuckled softly, taking the cup. "Thanks, it's been one of those weeks." Nathan leaned back in his chair, studying Sam for a moment. "I've been hearing a lot about how tough things are around here. You ever think about walking away? Sam hesitated, his fingers tightening around the cup. Honestly, all the time, but it's not that simple. I've got a daughter to think about. Lily. She's 8. And she's mad at me half the time because I'm never home. But what choice do I have? This job keeps the lights on. Nathan nodded, his expression somber. Must be hard trying to balance it all. It is, Sam admitted, his voice heavy. And Elena doesn't make it easier. She's all about control. If you cross her, you can kiss your hours goodbye. I can't afford to risk that. Nathan's jaw tightened as he listened, his resolve strengthening. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. What if it didn't have to be like that? What if someone actually cared enough to fix this place? Sam snorted. Someone like Pierce? Yeah, right. That guy doesn't even know we exist. Nathan smiled faintly, keeping his thoughts to himself. Instead he said, maybe people surprise you. Maybe it's worth sticking around to find out. Sam eyed him curiously but didn't press further. When the break ended, Nathan returned to the kitchen with a renewed sense of purpose. His staff didn't just need a better boss. They needed someone to believe in them, and he was determined to be that person. By the end of the shift, Nathan had solidified his plan. He would expose Elena, but not before rallying the staff behind him. They deserved to know the truth about what was happening, and that change was on the horizon. Nathan returned to the restaurant the next day with a sharper focus. The evidence against Elena weighed heavily in his pocket, but he knew the truth alone wasn't enough. He needed the staff on his side before exposing her, or the fallout would be chaotic, and the changes he envisioned wouldn't take root. The morning rush passed with its usual flurry of orders and clatter. Nathan kept his head down, playing the role of a quiet dishwasher, but he used every spare moment to observe. He noticed how the tension seemed to rise whenever Elena entered a room, how laughter and casual conversation died under her sharp gaze. The staff worked efficiently, but there was no camaraderie, no joy, just the robotic motions of people who had resigned themselves to survival. During the midday lull, Nathan found an opportunity to start building trust. He saw Claire struggling to carry a tray of glasses stacked precariously high. She moved quickly, her jaw tight, as if bracing herself for the inevitable lecture if something went wrong. Before she could take another step, Nathan stepped in. "Here, let me help," he said, taking half the tray from her. Claire blinked in surprise, then hesitated. "You don't have to. I've got it." "Consider it a team effort," Nathan replied with a faint smile. She studied him for a moment before nodding. "Thanks." They walked together toward the bar, setting the glasses down safely. Claire exhaled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You're not like most people who come through here," she said quietly. "What do you mean?" Nathan asked, genuinely curious. Claire shrugged. "Most new hires either don't last or keep their heads down and avoid everyone. But you actually seem like you care." Nathan paused, her words hitting him harder than expected. "Maybe I do." Claire tilted her head, narrowing her eyes. "Why? What's your angle?" Nathan chuckled softly. "No angle. Just trying to help where I can." Claire didn't look entirely convinced, but she didn't press further. As she returned to her duties, Nathan felt a small spark of hope. If he could earn her trust, the rest of the staff might follow. Later that afternoon, another opportunity presented itself when Sam accidentally dropped a plate of food during the lunch rush. The plate shattered, and the food spilled across the floor. The kitchen went silent as Elena stormed in, her expression thunderous. "What is wrong with you?" she snapped, her voice cutting through the room. "Do you know how much that costs us? Clean it up and stop wasting time." Sam flinched, his face pale, and quickly knelt to pick up the pieces. Nathan watched the scene unfold, his fists clenching at his sides. He couldn't intervene directly, not yet, but he could offer support. As soon as Elena left the room, Nathan grabbed a broom and dustpan, crouching down beside Sam. "I've got this," he said quietly. Sam looked up, startled. "You don't have to—" "I know," Nathan interrupted, "but no one should have to deal with that alone." They cleaned up the mess together, and when it was done, Sam gave Nathan a grateful nod. "Thanks, man. That was decent of you." "Anytime." Nathan replied. By the end of the shift, the mood in the kitchen had shifted slightly. Nathan's small acts of kindness hadn't gone unnoticed, and whispers of curiosity began to spread among the staff. Who was this dishwasher who seemed so different from everyone else? Why did he care so much about people he barely knew? As Nathan walked home that night, he felt the first stirrings of momentum. The staff wasn't fully on his side yet, but cracks were forming in the wall of distrust that had built up over time. He had planted seeds of hope, and now it was time to nurture them. Tomorrow, he would take the next step. It was time to start showing the staff that change wasn't just possible, it was already happening. And when the truth finally came out, they would be ready to stand with him. The next morning, Nathan arrived early again, determined to escalate his efforts. The evidence against Elena was solid, and the staff's growing curiosity about him was undeniable. He needed to use this momentum to spark real change before exposing the truth. He decided to target the smaller, everyday frustrations that had been brewing under Elena's rule. The first opportunity came when Nathan overheard Claire muttering about the perpetually broken coffee machine. She stood near the staff area, jabbing at the machine's buttons with mounting frustration. "Of course," she said under her breath. "It's broken again. Third time this week." Nathan approached, pretending to wipe down a nearby counter. "What's wrong with it?" Claire glanced at him, her expression exasperated. "What's not wrong with it? It only works half the time. And when it does, it spits out sludge instead of coffee. Elena says there's no budget to replace it." Nathan nodded, inspecting the machine. Its buttons were cracked, the display flickered weakly, and the drip tray wobbled precariously. "Mind if I take a look?" Claire raised an eyebrow. "You know how to fix coffee machines?" "Let's just say I've tinkered with a few things in my time," Nathan replied with a small smile. She stepped aside, watching as he carefully dismantled the machine. It didn't take long for him to identify the problem: a clogged filter and a loose connection. After a few adjustments and some improvised repairs, he reassembled it and tested it. The machine whirred to life, producing a fresh, steaming cup of coffee. Claire's jaw dropped slightly. "No way, you actually fixed it?" Nathan handed her the cup with a grin. "Try it. It might even taste like coffee now." She hesitated, then took a sip. Her eyes widened. "It's good. I don't believe it." "Sometimes things just need a little attention," Nathan said, his tone casual. Claire looked at him with newfound curiosity. "You're full of surprises, you know that?" Nathan shrugged. "Just trying to make life a little easier." The repaired coffee machine quickly became the talk of the staff. It was a small change, but it symbolized something bigger. A glimpse of what the restaurant could be if someone cared enough to address the little things. That afternoon, Nathan turned his attention to another issue: the outdated equipment in the kitchen. He noticed Sam struggling with a dull chef's knife, his movements slower and more deliberate than they should have been. Nathan approached, watching as Sam grimaced with frustration. "Need a hand?" Nathan asked. Sam sighed, setting the knife down. "It's this stupid knife. It's so dull I might as well be cutting with a spoon." Nathan picked up the knife, examining it. "Mind if I sharpen it for you?" Sam frowned, skeptical. "You know how to do that?" Nathan nodded. "I've picked up a few tricks. Give me 5 minutes." He grabbed a sharpening stone from a drawer, his movements swift and practiced. Within moments, the knife gleamed, its edge razor sharp. Nathan handed it back to Sam, who tested it on a tomato. The knife sliced through effortlessly, the clean cut leaving Sam momentarily speechless. "Where the hell did you learn to do that?" Sam asked, half impressed, half suspicious. Nathan smiled. "Let's just say I've been around kitchens long enough to know a thing or two." Sam shook his head, chuckling. "You're not like anyone else who's worked here, I'll give you that." As the day went on, Nathan continued to chip away at the cracks in the system. He replaced frayed cords on the kitchen appliances, reorganized the cluttered supply shelves, and even fixed a leaky faucet that had been dripping for weeks. Each small act drew more attention from the staff, who began to approach him with their own complaints and frustrations. By the end of the shift, a noticeable shift in energy had taken hold. The staff, once downtrodden and disillusioned, seemed lighter, more engaged. They whispered about the dishwasher who had managed to do more in a few days than Elena had in years. That evening, as Nathan sat alone in the break room, jotting down his observations, Claire walked in. She hesitated at the door, then stepped inside, her arms crossed. "All right, spill it," she said, her tone firm. Nathan looked up, confused. "Spill what?" "You're not just some random dishwasher," Claire said, narrowing her eyes. "Nobody comes in here and does what you've done without a reason. So, what's your deal?" Nathan set down his pen, his heart pounding. He knew this moment would come eventually, but he wasn't ready to reveal the full truth yet. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and met her gaze. "Let's just say I'm here to make things better," he said simply. "For everyone." Claire studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she nodded. "Well, you're off to a good start. Just don't screw it up." Nathan smiled. "I'll do my best." As she left the room, Nathan felt a flicker of hope. He was earning their trust, one small victory at a time. Soon, it would be time to reveal the truth. And when he did, he wanted them to believe in him, not just as their boss, but as someone who cared enough to make a difference. The following day, Nathan arrived with a renewed sense of determination. The seeds of trust he had planted were beginning to take root, and the staff seemed to view him in a new light. But he knew he couldn't stop now. He needed to bring the team together, to show them what could be possible if they worked as a united front. More importantly, he needed to prepare them for what was coming when Elena's corruption was exposed. The restaurant buzzed with its usual energy during the lunch rush, but Nathan noticed something different. The staff, once subdued and disconnected, were starting to interact more freely. Sam cracked a joke as he plated an order, drawing a rare laugh from Claire. Another server, who had been notoriously reserved, actually smiled as she passed by. It wasn't a complete transformation, but it was a start. Nathan decided to take the next step in his plan during the afternoon lull. He gathered a few staff members in the break room under the pretense of fixing the perpetually flickering light overhead. As he worked, he casually started a conversation. "Do you guys ever feel like this place could be better?" he asked, his voice light but deliberate. Sam, leaning against the counter with a coffee in hand, raised an eyebrow. "Define better." Nathan shrugged, still tinkering with the light fixture. "I mean, things like fair schedules, equipment that actually works, maybe even a boss who listens to what people need." Claire snorted, folding her arms. "Sounds like a fantasy." "Does it have to be?" Nathan asked, stepping down from the chair he was standing on. He looked around at the small group. "You all work so hard every day. Doesn't it make sense that you should have a place that supports you, a place where you're valued?" The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of his words settling over them. Finally, Sam spoke. "Yeah, it makes sense," he said, his voice quieter now. "But let's be real. Nobody upstairs cares about us. They care about the bottom line." Nathan met his gaze. "What if someone did care? What if someone actually wanted to make things better?" Sam hesitated, then let out a hollow laugh. "I'd say they'd better be ready for a fight, because Elena won't make it easy." "Maybe not," Nathan said. "But what if we started small? Fixing the little things, one at a time. If we can show that things can change, maybe we can make her job harder." Claire tilted her head, curiosity flickering in her eyes. "You've been doing that already, haven't you? Fixing stuff no one else bothers with?" Nathan smiled faintly. "Just trying to help where I can. But imagine if we all worked together. What could we accomplish?" The group exchanged glances, the skepticism on their faces slowly giving way to something else: hope. "What do you have in mind?" Sam asked, his tone cautious but intrigued. Nathan leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. "We start by looking out for each other. Cover shifts when someone needs it. Share tips for getting through the day. Fix what we can, when we can. And when the time comes, we stand together." The group nodded slowly, their expressions a mix of determination and cautious optimism. It wasn't a full commitment, but it was enough for now. Nathan had planted the idea, and he knew it would grow. As the shift progressed, Nathan saw the first signs of change. Claire helped a new server with her tables, showing patience that surprised even herself. Sam stayed an extra hour to help the kitchen staff clean up after a particularly chaotic dinner service, and when the coffee machine sputtered again, one of the line cooks stepped in to fix it without waiting for Elena's approval. The small acts of solidarity didn't go unnoticed. Elena, however, seemed oblivious to the subtle shift in the staff's behavior. She spent most of the evening in her office, barking occasional orders, but paying little attention to the growing sense of camaraderie in the restaurant. Nathan, meanwhile, kept a low profile, watching and waiting. The time for confrontation was drawing closer, but he needed to be sure the staff was ready to stand with him when it happened. He wasn't just preparing to expose Elena. He was preparing to show his employees that they had the power to demand something better. As the night wound down and the staff began to leave, Nathan lingered near the sink, rinsing off the last few dishes. Claire passed by on her way out, pausing briefly to look at him. "You're serious about this, aren't you?" she asked, her tone more curious than skeptical now. Nathan looked up, meeting her gaze. "I am, but I can't do it alone." Claire nodded slowly. "Well, for what it's worth, you've got me. Just don't let us down, okay?" "I won't," Nathan promised. As she walked out the door, Nathan felt a surge of determination. The staff was starting to believe in change, and the cracks in Elena's control were becoming more visible. All that was left was to push forward and make the truth undeniable. The moment of reckoning was closer than ever. The restaurant was buzzing with its usual energy the next day. But underneath the surface, Nathan could feel a shift. The staff moved with a quiet determination, their interactions laced with a newfound camaraderie. The subtle changes he had sparked were growing into something more, a shared hope that things could improve. Nathan knew it was time to take the next step. The evidence against Elena was solid, and he had slowly gained the trust of the staff. Now, he needed to prepare them for what was coming. If they were going to stand with him when the truth came out, they needed to understand just how much power they had. Late in the afternoon, during a rare moment of calm, Nathan gathered Sam, Claire, and a few other employees in the break room, under the guise of a quick coffee break. They sat around the small table, their curiosity palpable, as Nathan leaned forward, his voice low but steady. "Let me ask you something," he began. "What would you change about this place if you had the chance?" Sam looked at him skeptically. "Where do we even start? The schedules, the pay, the equipment, everything needs fixing." "Exactly," Nathan said, nodding. "But do you think that's ever going to happen if we wait for someone else to do it?" Claire frowned. "What are you saying? That we just fix it ourselves?" "I'm saying that we have more power than we think," Nathan replied. "Elena relies on all of you to keep this place running. Without you, the restaurant doesn't exist. That gives you leverage." Sam leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Leverage? Against Elena? She'd fire us in a heartbeat." "She might try," Nathan admitted, "but if you stand together, she can't fire all of you. And if we can prove that she's been taking advantage of you, stealing from the staff and running this place into the ground, then she'll be the one in trouble, not you." The room fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Finally, one of the younger servers spoke up, her voice hesitant. "You really think we can do that? Stand up to her?" Nathan met her gaze, his expression firm. "I don't just think you can. I know you can. But it won't work unless you trust each other and believe in the change we're trying to make." Claire studied him carefully, her skepticism giving way to curiosity. "And what about you? Why do you care so much?" Nathan hesitated for a moment, then decided it was time to share a piece of the truth. "Because I've seen what happens when people like Elena are allowed to get away with this kind of behavior. I've seen good people pushed to their limits, forced out of jobs they loved, and left feeling like they don't matter. That's not right, and I'm not going to stand by and let it happen." His words hung in the air, the room thick with a mix of doubt and hope. Sam leaned forward, his voice quiet but resolute. All right, let's say we trust you. What's the plan? Nathan smiled faintly. First, we gather everyone. We make sure every staff member knows what's going on and what's at stake. Then we confront Elena together. But we don't just accuse her. We show her the proof of what she's done. And when she tries to deny it, we stand firm. If we're united, she won't be able to manipulate or intimidate us. The group exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of fear and determination. It was a bold plan, one that required courage and solidarity. But as the minutes ticked by, Nathan could see the shift in their faces, the flicker of belief that they could make this work. "I'm in," Claire said finally, her voice steady. It's about time someone stood up to her. "Me too," Sam added, his jaw tightening. "If it means I can finally take a day off without worrying about losing my job, I'll do it." One by one, the others nodded their agreement. Nathan felt a surge of relief and pride as he looked around the room. They were ready, or at least they were willing to try. As the group dispersed to return to their duties, Nathan stayed behind, jotting down final notes in his pad. The next step would be critical: organizing a staff meeting where everyone could come together and voice their grievances. It would be risky, but if they succeeded, it would be the beginning of something transformative. That night, as Nathan walked home, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The staff believed in the possibility of change, and they were willing to fight for it. All that remained was to bring their efforts to a head, to expose the truth, confront Elena, and reclaim the heart of the restaurant he had built. The stage was set, and the moment of reckoning was just around the corner. The next day, Nathan put the final pieces of his plan into motion. He approached each staff member individually, sharing bits of what had been uncovered and urging them to attend a meeting after the dinner rush. The reactions varied. Some were nervous, others angry, but most were cautiously hopeful. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, nearly everyone had agreed to come. As the last customer left and the restaurant began to quiet down, Nathan stood at the edge of the dining room, watching the staff gather. They sat around tables pulled together in the center of the room, whispering among themselves. Sam and Claire sat near the front, their faces a mix of determination and uncertainty. Even the younger servers and cooks, who usually avoided conflict, were present. It was clear this was more than a meeting, it was a turning point. Nathan stepped forward, clearing his throat to silence the murmurs. His heart pounded, but he kept his voice steady. "Thank you all for being here," he began. "I know this isn't easy, and I know some of you are scared, but what we're about to do is necessary, because this place can't go on the way it has." He took a deep breath, his gaze sweeping across the room. "You've all been working under conditions that aren't fair. You've been overworked, underpaid, and disrespected. And while it's easy to blame people like Elena for that, the truth is, I share that blame too." The room went still, confusion flickering across the staff's faces. Nathan paused, then continued, his voice stronger now. "You see, I'm not just the dishwasher. My name is Nathan Pierce, and I'm the owner of this restaurant." A ripple of shock spread through the room. Gasps and murmurs broke out, but Nathan raised his hand to calm them. "I came here undercover because I needed to see what this place had become, and what I saw broke my heart. This isn't the restaurant I dreamed of building, and that's my fault. I trusted the wrong people, and I lost sight of what matters most. You." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, projecting the evidence he had gathered onto a nearby wall. Emails, spreadsheets, and transaction records illuminated Elena's corruption in stark detail. Elena has been stealing from the staff bonus pool, manipulating schedules to suit her favorites, and creating a toxic environment. She's betrayed your trust, and she's betrayed mine. The room erupted into angry whispers, the staff exchanging looks of disbelief and outrage. Sam stood, his voice cutting through the noise. "So, what do we do about it?" Nathan met his gaze. "We confront her, together. We show her that this ends now. And we do it knowing that change is coming. Not just in how this place is run, but in how you're treated. Fair pay, better schedules, respect. Those are promises I intend to keep, but I need your help to make this first stand." One by one, the staff began to nod. Claire stood, her arms crossed but her expression resolute. "Let's do it. She's had this coming for a long time." The room murmured in agreement, the energy shifting from fear to resolve. Nathan felt a surge of pride as he looked at the faces around him. They were ready. Elena arrived shortly after, summoned by a fabricated excuse Nathan had relayed through one of the servers. She stepped into the dining room with her usual air of superiority, her heels clicking against the polished floor. The sight of the entire staff gathered in silence stopped her in her tracks. "What's going on here?" she demanded, her eyes narrowing. Nathan stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "We need to talk, Elena." Her gaze darted to him, her sneer returning. "What are you doing here? Shouldn't you be washing dishes?" Nathan didn't flinch. "I should be running my restaurant, and making sure it's a place where people actually want to work." Elena froze, her expression shifting to confusion. "What are you talking about?" Nathan took a step closer, his voice unwavering. "I'm Nathan Pierce. I own this place, and I know everything." He gestured toward the wall where the evidence was still projected. The room fell silent as Elena's eyes widened, her face paling. She opened her mouth to speak, but Nathan cut her off. "You've stolen from the people who work hard every day to keep this place running. You've abused your power, mistreated the staff, and created an environment that's toxic and unsustainable, and now it ends." Elena stammered, her composure crumbling. "You can't prove any of that." "I can," Nathan interrupted, holding up his phone. "Every email, every transaction, every lie, it's all here, and I've already sent copies to the company's legal team." "You're done, Elena." The staff erupted into applause, their anger finally finding an outlet. Elena's protests were drowned out as Nathan turned to face his team. "This is your restaurant as much as it's mine," he said, his voice rising above the noise. "Starting today, things will be different. You'll be heard, you'll be respected, and you'll be valued. I promise you that." As Elena was escorted out by security, the staff gathered around Nathan, their relief and gratitude evident. Sam clapped him on the shoulder, grinning for the first time in weeks. "You actually did it." "No," Nathan said, looking around at the team. "We did it, and this is just the beginning." The room filled with laughter and applause as the staff celebrated their victory. Nathan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He had made mistakes, but now he was on the path to making things right, not just for himself, but for everyone who had believed in the promise of his restaurant.